So, you spend more than 2 hours talking about that very subject. Do you see meetings becoming more efficient and shorter and all that?
There are certainly changes you can make on the margins to make meetings more efficient, and bylaws like this should be reviewed every now and again to cut back on the excess and to make them simpler to understand. So I'm quite pleased about making these changes. Of course, the biggest way you make the meetings more efficient is talk about fewer things. And of course, the biggest thing council could do is get rid of the secondary suites off of every agenda, which takes up about 15% of council's time.
Oddly silent in these changes. Think about secondary suites.
Not about procedure bylaw.
Mr. Woolley seemed very frustrated, though, by the whole process.
Okay.
That's just the way it is.
I can't speak to his frustration.
But that's...
everyone got a memo saying this is how it's going to go, and whether or not he missed the memo, I mean, whatever. It's he has to own his own feelings about the situation, but his input is interesting, so I'm sure that will be taken into account.
With the code of conduct, do you think what Ms. Woolley proposed will work?
Yeah, it's very good, actually. The challenge with the previous code is that it was very, very important for me to do it in my first term because I was shocked that council didn't have a code. But frankly, when I drafted it with the assistance of the then policy advisor, really as a first draft. And it's actually very good to have someone with that kind of expertise go through and clean it up and make it more specific. I'm very, very pleased with it.
There's a lot of it, like when Councillor Chabot brought up an issue of somebody wanting to buy some land, and she says, well, send me a note. Are we going to see a lot of notes being sent to her, or is this policy clear enough?
Yes, I think policy is very clear, but I think that there will always be exceptions, and that's why we now have an ethics advisor specifically to help us through those exceptions.
It was brought up that there's someone who's being paid a fair amount to sit on a committee, and if that was public, they wouldn't want to. Can you expand any more on that situation?
No, because it was all interesting news to me too. So it'd be interesting to follow up on that because it is not something that has been in my world. I don't take honorariums for anything I do.
Can you clarify on the proposed change regarding the gifts policy, which
yes.
Right now it's $150, right?
So right now, our current policy, this is actually one of the big changes. Our current policy is permissive. You can accept anything you want as long as you disclose it if it's over X dollars. The new policy is restrictive. You cannot accept gifts unless they fall on this list, and you must disclose everything of any value. So it's actually quite a different philosophy from the current process, but the current process, a lot of folks will say, well, that isn't really a gift. I don't know if I should be able to disclose that. So the ethics advisor's thought here was to make it much more restrictive, and I think it's something well worth trying.
Why the change? Was there something you're trying to deal with, or?
No, I think that just the ethics advisor being an expert in this area didn't really feel that you can do it, but you must disclose it, really went far enough in giving people confidence that councillors were not acting inappropriately. It's not that they weren't, it's just that the policy, she felt there might be too many loopholes in it.
Not too many $145 gifts?
I just have a question from a colleague about the National Energy Board. I guess there's last week the federal government put out a discussion paper in response to the one you had criticized before, and there's kind of a mention in there, a sentence that says maintaining the National Energy Board in Calgary makes sense.
That's the right thing to do. I don't know what the final decision will be from the federal government, but certainly I'm glad that they are making that statement because it probably does make sense to change the residency requirement of the board members, but obviously the National Energy Board has to sit in Calgary.
Have you had any contact with the federal government on that issue?
No, not since last we spoke.
So Brian Mason and his federal counterpart are making a infrastructure announcement in Leduc tomorrow. Are we expecting anything in Calgary as we get into Stampede season?
Stay tuned.